Message from Starfleet Command, top priority.
You are listening to the TrekRanks podcast, a member of the Tricorder Transmissions Podcast Network. This is episode 189, featuring the top 5 two-hander episodes. Welcome, Star Trek fans. I am Jim Moorhouse. I'm the host of the TrekRanks podcast, and tonight we have kind of a different episode for you. I mean, it's a standard episode. You know, we're doing top 5 two-hander episodes, but two-handers is not exactly a household term, and it's a little bit of a kind of a cerebral reference in terms of TV and film production. So it'll take a little bit more explaining than normal in our diagnostic cycle, which we're going to get into in a minute. But in short, a two-hander episode is basically an episode that features a lot of scenes with just two characters kind of isolated together in a specific situation, a two-hander, as it were. But we're going to get into more of that in a second. So let's introduce our expert LCARS panel this evening. First up, he's returning for his 8th overall TrekRanks appearance, coming to us from the NCC, North Carolina, Mr. ATOS himself. It's Chris Burris. Welcome back, Chris.
Thanks, Jim. It's good to be here, and it's good to be here to discuss this topic with everybody. So glad to be back.
This is a fun one. And our second guest tonight is another one of our favorites, the purveyor of the Star Trek VHS account on Twitter, back for his 4th TrekRanks topic, hailing us from the Glasgow Expanse in the Scotland sector. It's Commander Lee Hutchison, but you can slap his back and call him Hutch. Welcome back, Lee.
Absolute pleasure to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to chatting with Chris for the first time. I've heard you on episodes before, so I'm excited to talk Trek with you as well.
I love it. Did anybody actually call you Hutch, Lee?
Yeah, it was my nickname as a kid. It was Hutch, and my brother was nicknamed Hutchie. So yeah, I remember as a kid seeing that episode being, even though his middle name has a random N in the middle, I would still take Hutch. Hutch. It was close enough.
Yeah, he's a Hutchinson. You're Hutchison. It's close enough. Okay, going to be a great show. Let's get into our TrekRanks recalibration.
What are you recalibrating?
Everything. It's a sweeping, a recalibration of all systems.
All right, the TrekRanks Charter has 2 clauses. 1, we rank Trek so we can have a fun conversation about Star Trek. And 2, the ranks don't matter. We just use them as the framework to have a deep dive conversation about all the things we love about Trek. Because here on TrekRanks, we
already have infinite diversity and infinite combinations.
There are no wrong answers at TrekRanks. This show is about sharing the things we love about Star Trek. And we love it all, from TOS to TNG, straight to the Enterprise and the Kelvin timeline, and Discovery, Picard, Strange New World, Short Treks, Lower Decks, Prodigy. It's all fair game here on the TrekRanks podcast.
Black alert. Black alert.
And a reminder that this episode of TrekRanks is current now through the complete 2nd season of Star Trek Prodigy, which means 933 total episodes of Star Trek across the past 58 years. We just jumped up to 933 episodes. That's amazing. And one final reminder that we use episodes as a shorthand term, but the 13 films are always in play as well.
Hailing frequencies open.
Thank you, Mr. Worf. You can hail me directly on Twitter at TrekRanks or at Enterprise N Extra on Blue Sky at TrekRanks. And you can see our extensive rankings of all the Treks at TrekRanks.com. And don't forget to call and leave us a message with your own picks at 757-828-7265. That's 757-828-RANK. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Chris and Lee, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you on Subspace. Chris.
Yes, you can find me at Burris CJ on Twitter/X. I'm also at Burris CJ on Threads and Blue Sky. So, and a few other places in between, but you can just find me there.
And Lee, how about you? Still on Twitter?
Yeah, still on Twitter. You can find me at Star Trek VHS or at Lee Hutchison _, and you can find me podcasting on the A24 Project.
Perfect. All right, let's get into our diagnostic cycle to get into this show.
Computer, run a level 2 diagnostic.
All right, really quick. I kind of previewed this before, but I want to dive into this one more time and describe again exactly what we mean by a two-hander in the world of TV and film. So a two-hander is defined when two main characters are the focus of the story and they're in a situation where they're isolated together, and they're kind of showcasing their differences against each other. They're kind of being explored in terms of the contrast in their life experiences or status or loyalties or whatever, some kind of play against each other. And so basically any episode where a major plot or subplot features a large portion of the story where two characters are isolated together and kind of playing off each other in that contrast. So yeah, lots of that over in Trek over the years. So I think this is going to be a huge landscape for us to choose from in Trek. A little more cerebral topic. Had to kind of dig in and think about it a little bit. So let's get into this now with our Prime Directives, because I'm dying to hear how these guys broke it all down.
Do they know about Prime Directive?
They know everything I know, sir.
And you're about to know everything we know about our Prime Directive. So, Chris, we're going to start with you. How did you define your Prime Directive and come up with your picks on this topic?
Well, this was an interesting one as far as how to pair two characters in a certain situation. So what I was looking at was an instance where the characters were definitely alone. They were unable to be brought back by conventional means, at least right away. And there was something that was over the whole reason why they were there. So it could be like life or death. It could be an important mission, or it could be what we need to do in order to survive. So that was what I was looking at.
Okay, I'm thinking about my list as it relates to that. A couple of mine might fit that breakdown. Okay, I like that. Lee, how about you? How did you kind of try to target this?
Yeah, I looked at it in a couple of different ways of sometimes like physically being in that space or planet, hey, even a pit together, which is all too common in Star Trek, and thinking of things like that, but also kind of two-handers in the way of like dynamics between characters, and almost thinking of someone like maybe one of our main characters or a lead character is very much the kind of planet, and we've got someone kind of orbiting them or almost pulling at them in terms of like an almost kind of gravity between their two kind of plots and points of view. And you know, it might even be that some people only share a handful of scenes, but their presence over an episode or their journey is pulling and contrasting with theirs as well. And we get a real contrast in their journeys, experiences, and arcs in an episode or season as well. So really kind of looking at in those ways of one matches the other in those respects.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So you kind of mentioned, so how much did it matter to you, Lee, how much the characters were isolated in the episode where it was just the two of them?
Isolation could be a mental thing as much as anything, and so on. And, you know, as we get into some of the episodes, there's physical isolation, there's isolation in space, there's isolation with feelings, you know, even just sort of, so it could be kind of, you could really pull at it in those respects as well, and just really think about where's the character's kind of psyche at that time. And you know, in a few of those episodes as well, you know, it's not just the kind of the physical isolation, but that mental isolation as well.
Chris, how about you? Was that a factor for you, like just the characters, how often they were kind of alone together?
It was, and it was also a matter of, at least for my list, what was the motivation for getting these characters back to normalcy?
Got it. Yeah.
In terms of their respective lives, whether they were Starfleet or not. So that's just a little bit of a giveaway for where some of my picks were going. But also what makes them tick when they're put in this situation.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, Lee, how does that interplay work between the two, in not just in terms of rank and so forth, but also in terms of these characters as people?
Yeah. Cool. Okay. All right. So you have little pieces of that everywhere. So my Prime Directive, it took a real crazy turn right at the end for me that changed everything. So I've never done this before, but I basically had my entire list done, all 5 picks, and they were basically just the 5 episodes I wanted to highlight, and they were based on 2 characters spending a lot of time together, isolated, And I did kind of look at the amount of time. Like I actually went through and kind of estimated what percentage of the episode were they just by themselves, these two actors by themselves. And then were they in contrast to each other too? Like if they were working together, then I eliminated it. For me, they had to be kind of, they could be working together, but they also had to be thinking or discussing something in contrast. There had to be some level of contrast between the two, like an odd couple situation or something. But then as I was researching my last pick, I wanted to look up how many times I'd chosen this episode because I knew I'd picked it like 4 times before. And I looked it up and it was on my list for top 5 road trips. So I went back and I looked at episode 58 and I looked at my top 5 road trips. It was 4 of the exact same picks I had for 2-hander episodes. So I threw them all out. I said, I cannot believe this happened. I literally just repeated all my picks from road trips. So I threw all those out and I started over. I just started from scratch and I had my secondary systems. I had some extra picks, but it was funny for me just to think, man, I have all this work done, but I'm throwing it all out. So I started over. So my new list really focused on cool episodes, 2 characters completely isolated for really big portions of the episodes, and 2 characters that at some level were either in an odd couple situation or kind of sniping at each other or battling or something. So I got a whole new list. Okay, this is amazing. This topic's going to be really cool, I think, and different for us. All right, let's do it. Third Demonicon, introduce us to the order of things.
I am a Jem'Hadar. He is a Vorta. It is the order of things.
Thank you, Third Demonicon. As always, we're going to start with our 5-word summary and a hashtag to tease each of our picks. Then we'll reveal our 2-hander episode picks and the reasons we're highlighting that one. And after getting through 5 rounds of picks, we'll get into our secondary systems. And if we have any duplicate picks, make sure you listen for the Defiant Torpedoes. All right, Chris, we're going to start with you. What's your number 5 pick for your top 5 2-hander episodes? Let's hear it.
Okay. For my number 5 pick, the 5 words are "for you, one more round," and the hashtag is Action Saru once more. And the episode is Under the Twin Moons from Discovery.
Oh, cool.
From season 5, was just wrapped a few weeks ago. So with this one, I was going back and forth with a few other episodes from Discovery, but this one really stood out to me because it represented one more time for Saru and Burnham as colleagues and shipmates to be working together on a mission, but they were about to take very different career paths by the end of the episode, with Saru going to work as a Federation official and Michael continuing to be on Discovery. So this really just represented the culmination of the arc that these 2 characters have been on since season 1, when they first met on Discovery, all the way to now, to season 5, where they were basically working to resolve this problem, but bringing their own strengths and trust for each other into its resolution. And they really relied on each other's strengths to complete the mission, where you got the Action Saru moment where he was running through the forest over that rough terrain, which is amazing. And Michael had her scientific approach to finding the clue to retrieve the next portion of the artifact. And it was just a very good mix of having these 2 characters really having to come together in a potential life or death situation, but also with the trying to find the answer to the preserver's technology. It was just a moment where they really had to focus on channeling their strengths in order to not just retrieve the artifact before Maul and Locke did, but also to get the mission going. And it was just a great moment for me.
Dude, I love this pick. Super outside the box. So first of all, I do have a Discovery season 5 on my secondary systems. It was just off my list. It's a different episode. But I love this episode for a couple of reasons. One, at the time, we don't really know it's like that really kind of Saru's swan song in this capacity. Because after this, he's gone for 5. Well, he's in the next episode for a little bit, but then he's gone for 5 straight episodes, and he's back for the last 2. So it really is kind of the swan song for Saru Burnham working together. So now looking back on it, it's really sweet for that reason. Just kind of a cool culmination for them. And I love that the Promelians are kind of the planet they're on, and all the stuff with the Promelians from Booby Trap from TNG. That was a cool addition for me. The whole mystery in this one really kind of sets the tone for the whole season of, okay, this is what this season's going to be like, with all these different little puzzles they have to solve on the way, literally like throughout the episode, one at a time, to kind of get to the end. And it's got those Arsenal of Freedom vibes too from TNG season 1. Just a cool episode, a lot of fun. Really, this is one of those ones that just sets the tone for Discovery season 5. It's my favorite season of Discovery. I love it. Lee, what's your take?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode too. And I remembered one of the strong feelings I had when I was watching it the first time was, you think of Discovery and there's been so much turnover, characters coming, going, creative change, and you sit there watching it and there does feel like a bit of an end of the line to their journey here. And you sit there thinking, where have we come from in those early season 1 days, and the tension between those two characters. And I really appreciated that. And it just felt like sort of the end of an era, this episode. So I'm glad that those two got some time together.
Yeah, and full-on two-hander for Doug Jones and Sonequa Martin Green. I mean, doing all the heavy lifting on the planet together. Cool, outside-the-box pick. I love it. Okay, Lee, what's your first pick here for round 5?
Definitely not out of the box with this one. So my 5-word summary is tossed salads and Tasper eggs, # literal naked aggression. And it's Jean-Luc Picard and Gul Madred in Chain of Command Part 2. So, it was one of those ones. Sometimes you think, go deep cut for the sake of going deep cut. But for me, this was one of the most perfect two-handers of an episode. And it's one of the joys of this episode. You could literally pick Riker and Jellicoe as well as one of those kind of two-handers across the two-part. But for me, it was really clear and kind of Gul Madred and Picard. And it's kind of, you get that. And I really wanted with my picks to have those contrasting kind of characters and journeys. And, you have both of these, not just actors, but as kind of characters, these both elder statesmen. And, you have Picard being subjected to horrific torture. And we sort of see his kind of steadhand kind of resilience, his adherence to his principles against kind of all this horrific odds, when I'm sure it would have been so easy to see, I do see kind of these many lights and so on. And, Madred, is it's so many times he seems like a good, kind person. He's a family man. You can have a really lovely conversation with him. I often think during the Dominion War, he's someone you'd want as an ally. You could maybe poach him. But he's got such manipulative, he's sadistic, and I just find that fascinating to kind of see over this kind of hour of television, just that kind of watching Picard's humanity and dignity up against the kind of dehumanization that he was kind of getting from Madred, and just how difficult that was to maintain and how close it was to breaking. And it's just a real powerhouse of performance from both actors. And it's just one of the most iconic 2 hours of Star Trek TV. But obviously you think of it, and Madred's only really in that second part, and it's just a really great, piece of writing and a real two-hander to watch.
I love this pick. I mean, I didn't think of this one. So I have a long list of secondary systems. Did not think of this one. So surprise for me. I love it. This is such a good one. I mean, and there's going to be a lot of picks like this, just acting powerhouses. This is Patrick Stewart and David Warner just going at it, for this entire episode, back and forth. The script is amazing. This is the acting between these two together and just crushing it, right? Scene after scene after scene is the best. I love it.
Whenever I look at you now, I won't see a powerful Cardassian warrior. I will see a 6-year-old boy who is powerless to protect himself.
Be quiet.
spite of all you've done to me, I find you a pitiable man.
Picard, stop it, or I will turn this on and leave you in agony all night.
Ah, you called me Picard.
What are the Federation's defense plans for Minos Corva?
There are 4 lights.
There are 5 lights. How many do you see now?
You are 6 years old. Weak and helpless. You cannot hurt me.
Chris, what's your take on it?
Well, this is an excellent pick. This is one I hadn't thought of in my review, but like you've both been saying, the interplay between Patrick Stewart and David Warner is like 2 battleships just taking shots at each other.
Yeah.
But David Warner's Gul Madred is literally holding the cards against Picard. It's just a fascinating sequence of where Picard's command and control is really taken away from him, even more than what the Borg did to him in The Best of Both Worlds, because he has an adversary in the same room who is just finding ways to really stick it to him. And there's really nothing he can do to combat it at any point. And it's just a fascinating exercise in what is control and the torture that Picard is subjected to by this, as he said, scared little boy who grew up.
Yeah, he kills him with that line. I'm still trying to kind of come to grips with your line, with your take there, Lee, of that you see, for lack of a better term, humanity. You see some humanity in Madred, and I'm not sure I see it, man. I just think he's awful. It's so manipulative, and I'm not sure I see a situation where he's a guy I would have pleasant conversations with.
But then I think when you think they chat about like I do believe him, there's that element that he's a true gaslighter or manipulator, even when he's
right.
I would at the end I would really enjoy, doing digging in the dirt, doing some, investigations.
You're saying if all things are equal and you could sit there and talk to them knowing you can manipulate them back and all bets are off,
yeah.
and you're not in jeopardy. You would enjoy that side of it.
Yeah, there's an alternative reality where they are they're equals. They are probably intellectual powerhouses where they go enjoy kind of looking in old Cardassian ruins for artifacts and so on. And when he says that to Picard, at the end, I would genuinely have enjoyed doing this with you. It's just unfortunate the reality that they face is they have to, more so Madred than Picard, essentially he has to try and break this man as well. But I truly believe he does respect him and so on. And, there's that weird dynamic between the two as well. It makes it a more interesting villain than someone that's a bit pantomime.
Cool. All right. I like that perspective. I like that perspective a lot. Okay, let's go to my round 5 pick. 5 words in the hashtag. Fast Friends First Foray Forged hashtag via two-hander exposure. This is season 2, episode 13 of Deep Space Nine Armageddon Game. And this is Miles and Bashir really starting to get to know each other for the first time as they run. They're on the run from the Talani and the Kellerans as they try to destroy all the harvesters. And so I did a time check on all mine. So there's about 14 solid minutes in this, 45-minute episode of just O'Brien and Bashir together on the run, just the two of them doing the back and forth acting. And there's really some great conversations on the planet when they're on the run and they decide to kind of hide out in this one location to kind of wait to be rescued, and the contrast are there. They're obviously working together, but they're bickering, right? It's Bashir and Miles. They're arguing about marriage and lost love, but not arguing, but they're sniping about it. Wife and kids, perspective on family, and O'Brien has the great quote back at Bashir about what about me and Mrs. O'Brien, when he kind of says it under his breath. I just love that moment. And Miles, and then Bashir comes back with, you career officers don't know what you're missing. It's just really good back and forth between the young upstart officer who wants to go to the party and kind of hook up and meet some ladies, and the salt of the earth non-com who just wants to get home to his family and loves his wife despite any of the perceived challenges that those two might be facing from this annoying, cocky officer. I love it.
Somehow, marriage just doesn't seem fair.
Fair?
Fair. To them. I mean, look at us. Our lives are constantly in danger. There's enough to worry about without worrying about the wife and kids at home worrying about us. I'm sorry, Chief. I just feel that way. A lot of career officers feel that way.
Well, you career officers don't know what you're missing.
Really? That may be so. I just look at you and Mrs. O'Brien and I...
What about me and Mrs. O'Brien?
Nothing.
What?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's no secret that your assignment to this station hasn't been conducive to your marriage.
Say that again?
Why don't we just forget it?
It's the first intelligent thing you've said since we got here.
And it's at the end of this, Miles tells Julian that it's been an honor serving with you, and it's just great stuff across the board. I really like this episode a lot. One of my favorite rewatches. Chris, what's your take on Armageddon Game?
Well, this one just missed my secondary systems list, but it's an excellent episode. And speaking of, as I was mentioning before, with the evolution of the Burnham-Saru relationship, the evolution of O'Brien and Bashir's relationship over the course of the series is another fascinating one to watch. Whereas they started as like sniping children, but then they ended up as best friends. And the way that they really had to, again, rely on each other. And as the episode went on, Bashir really had to carry the weight of getting the two of them out of danger, since O'Brien had become susceptible to the harvesters. It was just something that was really interesting to watch. And I think it's a good pick. Very good pick.
Lee, how about you?
Yeah, it was one of those ones I had in my original kind of head of like, oh, this could be an interesting one to put on the list, because it felt like there had to be an O'Brien and Bashir episode on there. So I'm glad someone picked it.
Yeah, this one really stood out for me. Fun one. Okay, let's go to round 4. Chris, what do you got?
Okay, so round 4, the 5 words are: want to say some history, and the hashtag is talk about star-crossed. And the episode is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow from Strange New Worlds.
Oh, that's one I thought about. Yeah.
And this one was interesting because you had the accidental pairing between La'an from the Prime Universe and an alternative version of James T. Kirk getting together to put history back on track. And La'an brought her baggage of trying to distance herself from the name Kanuni Singh as much as possible. And you have an alt Kirk who has no frame of reference for what's going on at all. So this really is a case of an odd couple relationship. And while they were together, Kirk was able to appeal to La'an to find the humanity in her ancestor before he would become the man that he would become, and the man that he had caused so much shame and grief for his family that they try not to acknowledge him, as they try to minimize his name in their lives as much as possible. And then when Kirk was taken out of the picture by being shot and killed, La'an had to carry on without him. And that just meeting Khan as a boy just really put her in a different frame of mind based on what Kirk had brought to their situation. And then at the end of the episode, you had, once they were returned to, once La'an was returned to the Enterprise, her relationship with Prime Kirk became even more complicated before they even met. And that added another layer of isolation between the two characters, because La'an has feelings for a man who no longer exists, and yet his counterpart has no clue about what their relationship was. So it just further puts La'an in a situation where she's just isolated in this circumstance because of an incident that she had no control over. So that was one reason why I chose this episode.
Amazing. You said that in your Prime Directive, and man, that really applies to this pairing, because that's one of my favorite threads in Strange New World Season 2, is that the way this episode continues to play out and have cause and effect to stuff that's happening in Lost in Translation and, of course, Subspace Rhapsody and other episodes down the road. It's incredible. I love this episode. I love Strange New World Season 2. Christina Chong, Paul Wesley, amazing together. They're just killing it this whole episode. Absolute two-hander, just the two of them kind of riffing off each other the whole way through. Lee, what's your take on this one? So good.
Great pairing, and it's the reason this episode is just one of the highlights of the season for me. And yeah, I'm really excited that we got a couple more episodes out of them together, even a little bit of a song and a duet and some great awkward moments later in the season. It was really, a lot of the hard work was done in this episode, and yeah, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's so cool that this is like another Paul Wesley appearance, but yet it's still not actually Kirk until all the way, I think Lost in Translation is the first time we actually see the actual Prime timeline Kirk. So super cool. Wow. Awesome. 2 straight great picks, Chris. All right, Lee, what's your number 4 pick?
Yeah, so my number 4 pick, 5-word summary, all this over some bread, hashtag do you hear the people sing, and it is Michael Eddington and Sisko in for the uniform. So for me, this was my first pick when I really thought about this one, and it's one of those ones they share so many scenes together over their little virtual computer, the virtual hologram monitor, and for me it's such a two-hander in a couple of different ways. And I go back to that kind of hashtag first, where it really embraces the Les Miserables kind of book and musical, and Sisko as Javert, this police officer that just will not let this kind of guy that committed a kind of faultless crime. I mean, at the end of the day, Eddington stole, there's some other crimes involved in there, but some replicators, similar to Valjean, he stole some bread and he, had to face the punishment for that. And I really love watching that kind of clash of ideals and discussion about the Federation and the Maquis in a way that, Deep Space Nine did so well. And you sort of see that Sisko takes Eddington's betrayal of Starfleet as a real kind of critique, and he's just raging at him. And then, for Eddington, that Sisko is and the Federation they're a parasite. Why are you spending your time hunting down us kind of freedom fighters? We just want to just get on with things as well. And I find that so fascinating to kind of watch, and the real cat and mouse bit between the two, and how they kind of continue to push each other to more extreme measures. And it's always an episode you just watch, and the kind of final scene does a lot of heavy lifting of, well, actually, we may have kind of poisoned a planet, but actually the Cardassians can go there and the humans can go to this other planet. So it wasn't so much a war crime as such, poisoning a planet, but it's such a fascinating one to just watch this really fascinating kind of dialogue. Sisko is just unwavering in that commitment to the Federation. And then you've got Eddington rebelling against it and embracing that kind of cause. And, it's one of those ones, it is hard, and I know that there's been interviews with Ira, Stephen Bear, etc., where they're like, I think we dropped the ball a little bit with the Eddington character, that we didn't quite nail him, but this one's a great one, and you find it hard not by the end of the episode to be Eddington is the hero, really. Isn't the Federation, the bad guys, they're really punching down on these, harmless rebels by and large, and, they're fighting the good fight, and Sisko just will not let it rest, and he takes it so personally, just pounding that kind of boxing, whatever it's called, and it's so fascinating to just watch that personal vendetta versus the ideological struggle, and there's such that mix of duty, rebellion, that I just think it comes to Blaze of Glory, but Dax romanticizes a little bit of Eddington, and I think this episode does a great job of it as well, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to really come away watching it and going, yeah, the Federation, great bunch of guys here, and so on, and I think that's all down to these two here, and, they really do flip it between the two characters.
Do you realize what you've done?
I've only just begun. I'm going to eliminate every Maquis colony in the DMZ.
You're talking about turning hundreds of thousands of people into homeless refugees.
That's right. When you attacked the Malinche, you proved one thing, that the Maquis have become an intolerable threat to the security of the Federation, and I am going to eliminate that threat.
But think about those people you saw in the caves. Huddled and starving, they didn't attack the Malinche.
You should have thought about that before you attacked a Federation starship. Helm! Lay in a course for Tracken 2, Warp 6. Commander, prepare 2 more torpedoes.
Engine room, bridge. Set course 050
Unless safety's on torpedoes 3 and 4.
Can't you see what's happening to you? You're going against everything you claim to believe in. And for what? To satisfy a personal vendetta?
You betrayed your uniform!
And you're betraying yours, right now! The sad part is you don't even realize it. I feel sorry for you, Captain. This obsession with me, look what it's cost you.
Major, shut that thing off! Commander Worf, prepare to launch torpedoes!
Wait! If you call off your attack, I'll turn over all our biogenic weapons.
Not enough!
All right, Javert. I'll give you what you want. Me.
Well, For the Uniform, one of my all-time favorite episodes. I love your kind of letting Sisko off for his war crime, in quotes. And I'll just say, man, I don't think they dropped the ball on Michael Eddington at all. Blaze of Glory would have been on my list, but it was on my road trips list. So I left it off. Because in that one's kind of the same, where it's just the two-hander. It's just Michael Eddington, Kenneth Marshall, and Avery Brooks just kind of going at it the whole way through on Blaze of Glory, and the same with For the Uniform. But of course, in this one, they're not really together, right? It's that, and in the production, they were like, man, we can't just do this on a view screen. We have to conjure up this holographic communicator and do these scenes where they're actually in the same room, where it feels like they're in the same room together. Because it's really the first time we ever saw it, and one of the few times we see it in 90s era Trek. But it was necessary, works, and all-time great episode of Star Trek. I love it. Chris, what's your take?
Well, I agree. This is one of my favorite episodes of Deep Space Nine. And the fact that, except for the beginning and the end of the episode, Sisko and Eddington are technically not in the same room or sharing the same space, which literally puts them on opposing sides without saying as much. And it's just a great pick for showing that you don't necessarily have to occupy the same space in order to have a good bit of, well, for both characters to literally match wits with each other, with Sisko gaining the upper hand by some, well, less than Starfleet procedures, but it was definitely one of those moments where Sisko and Eddington just really changed the dynamic in terms of Starfleet and the Maquis. So perfect episode. Good pick, Lee.
I love it. Let's close out round 4 with my pick. I can't believe this episode's only been picked one time previously on TrekRanks, and it was not by me. So it's the first time I'm picking it. 5 words in a hashtag. Hell to pay on whole hashtag. If you were that kind of commander, we wouldn't be having this conversation. This is Enterprise Season 2, Episode 3, Minefield. And this is Archer and Reed as they clear the air on the whole of the Enterprise NX-01. Brilliant episode. Probably should be ranked higher on my list. I have it 34 over at Enterprise TrekRanks, but you get a little bit of everything in this episode, right? Ton of action, Romulans. It's all framed around a two-hander with Archer and Reed kind of going at it with Reed. This is one where Reed's leg is pinned to the hull of the ship by this mine that's landed on the ship and hasn't exploded. And at this era, the early 2000s, this episode just looked and felt different than anything we'd ever seen in Trek. It was that kind of big visual creative idea that all of a sudden I feel like in the writer's room, they were like, we could actually pull this off. Whereas any idea like this 5 years prior would have been like, there's no way we can do that with visual effects or the budget and things. So just the amount of things they did in this episode is really cool. All right, I did like time check. There was about 17 minutes with Archer and Reed together. They start off in the captain's mess having a meal. They get interrupted. They end up on the hull together, and they're going at it the whole time with Reed kind of challenging Archer on his command style, and Archer kind of giving it right back. Really, really good stuff back and forth the whole way through. I love it. Dominic Keating and Scott Bakula kind of duking it out the whole way through. Great episode, Minefield. Lee, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, this was one I thought of originally when you just think of it, quite literally that two-hander. And this is one of the go-to ones, especially being out in that hull. Great choice.
Chris, how about you?
Good choice, especially for the way that Reed wasn't afraid to challenge Archer on what he felt was a lax command structure. And he begrudgingly admitted, well, maybe things aren't so bad with the way you command after all at the end. So very good pick.
Yeah, at the very end, he's basically like, I guess I wouldn't have survived if you weren't the kind of commander I was challenging you to not be. So it's a really good one. Fun stuff. Okay, round 3. Oh, the soup round. Let's do it.
Are you going to put that in my soup?
Chris, what's your number 3 pick?
Okay, so my 5 words are so close and so far. The hashtag is unexpected away mission, and the episode is the next phase from season 5 of TNG.
Oh, yeah.
And this one is unique because Ro and Geordi are literally out of phase with everybody else on the Enterprise, the Romulan vessel, except for that one Romulan, but that's another story. But they are literally separated from everyone who they know and care about who could help them, but they didn't know how they could help them at first. And Geordi didn't share Ro's belief at the beginning that they were dead, and was working to prove that it wasn't the case. So there he had the conflict because Ro was more willing to accept their fate, but Geordi was like, no, we need to find a way out of this. There's got to be a way to get back to normal. And over the course of the episode, this brought Ro more into the Enterprise family by gaining Geordi's trust and vice versa, where they had literally just the two of them to depend upon to get back in sync with the rest of the basically the universe. And again, you had both characters bring their skills, Geordi with his engineering skills, and even Ro with her forthright take on situations. She still had the idea of using the Romulus phaser to flood 10 forward with enough chronotons, getting my terminology right here, so that they could be detected and brought back to normal by the episode's end. So again, this is another literal isolation of just being taken out of sync, and it's just a unique situation that allowed both characters to shine, both alone and together.
Yeah, not much cooler than that final scene with that Romulan phaser on Overload exploding with all the chronotons. I love that scene. Love that moment. Yeah, these two together again they're doing most of the heavy lifting in this episode for sure. Lee, what's your take on the next phase and Ro and Geordi?
This was another episode I had considered, and it was quite crazy when I sat down and made my long list. I had like 4 episodes of Ro being in a sort of two-hander.
Really?
You think of Picard, and then you think of even Journey's End and so on. Her and Picard, even just her sort of debut in this episode as well. I just thought there's something so great about her for these episodes, and just unfortunately she didn't make the cut. So another one where I'm really glad that something I thought is being represented anyway. So it's like I picked it, so I'm happy.
I love it. Yeah, I definitely thought of Michelle Forbes and Patrick Stewart in Imposters in season 3 of Picard, because that was amazing with the two of them going at it. All right, the next phase. That's an awesome pick and a great underrated episode of TNG. Lee, what's your super round pick?
So my 5-word summary: a journey into the abyss, #Marvin Rush goes dark too. And that is Enterprise season 3 episode 19, Damage, and it's Archer and T'Pol. So this is probably my loosest kind of two-hander, but I really feel it's a pretty important one as well. And this is two characters that, while they maybe only share one real scene together, they're both sort of on a journey really to hell. And in this episode, T'Pol with her addiction to Trellium D that nearly gets her killed a couple of times, while the Enterprise is completely falling apart. Archer really being forced into this kind of ethical dilemma about sort of stealing the warp coil. And I just find it fascinating to kind of watch, because you have these two characters going through kind of, their own personal hell. And, T'Pol is near enough coming through the other side of it. She's been able to confess, and that's where help begins. Whereas Archer, that desperation is pushing him to do it. And I love how they're both going through that difficulty. And there's just that really fantastic scene in the kind of the ready room that's just completely dark, falling apart. And there's just this outpouring of emotion, and T'Pol trying to stop Archer trying to justify himself. And, you have these two characters just incredibly vulnerable, compromised, and just watching their struggles together. And the whole episode just revolves around their pain. And it's not just the ship that's damaged, but hey, it's these people too as well. And I find that just fascinating to watch these two over this episode. And it happens in the end. They make the terrible choice, but you have to kind of hope that there's going to be some sort of redemption and hope for Archer, much like T'Pol, as we're starting to see her sort of recovery. But just so fascinating with this episode, and just how tightly connected their arcs are at this point. It's not an A story and B story really at this point for me. It's just two characters reaching the peak of their arc, and I love watching those two going at it in the ready room. You just have it like 5 minutes earlier, Phlox comes in, I'm going to go potentially invade the ship, get everyone ready, there could be casualties, okay. And then you've got T'Pol really tearing into Archer. Just fascinating and great, great TV, great acting, and just makes this episode one where I just think of it as two people really struggling, and just makes for a great two-hander in my eyes.
Yeah, as soon as you picked it, I was like, well, that's the scene, those back-to-back scenes. And you had Marvin Rush in your 5 words and a hashtag. Did he direct it, or was he just do the lighting?
He was just the lighting. Well,
yeah.
sometimes it's one of those ones. The lack of lighting is sometimes just fantastic. And you just sit there thinking, going, God, this is great. I think my partner a few weeks ago was like, God, this episode of House of Dragon, people complained it was too dark and couldn't see anything. And it's like, well, they need to take tips from Marvin Rush. That is a great DP.
He knows how to do it. And that episode just could not look any better with those scenes. And yeah, you nailed it. Bakula and Jolene Blaylock just killing it in these 2 scenes where she's really challenging him hard, and he knows what he has to do. This is brutal. This one's wrong. I never would have thought of this one. A little bit loose definition, like you said, but hey, that's why we do Trek Ranks, because you want to talk about it and highlight this one scene. It's a two-hander, this scene, that's for sure. And absolutely worth talking about. This is episode, I think it's been, I just searched it. It's been picked twice before on Trek Ranks. I love it. It's a absolute underrated classic. Damage, Enterprise. Chris, what's your take?
Well, you couldn't see me punching the air, but I was. And even though this wasn't on either my list, it's still a good episode because Archer and T'Pol really went to dark places. And given what had happened throughout the course of the season, that really culminated in the previous episode with what happened to Archer, T'Pol, and the Enterprise. And just to see the aftermath of that was just fascinating to watch. And I agree with you, Lee. Shows of today could really take tips from Marvin Rush about how to light for darkness, which is kind of an oxymoron there, but it's true because you could still see what was going on, and just the darkness that had descended on the ship, particularly Archer and T'Pol, was just something to really take in. So excellent pick.
Okay, let's close out the soup round. I actually just looked this up because I was thinking, I don't know if this pick's ever been picked on Trek Ranks before. So we're banging the Vulcan gong right now because this is the first time this episode has ever been picked on Trek Ranks. So I'm just realizing 5 words and a hashtag. I'm not your son, Federation, hashtag. I'm your executioner. This is Voyager Season 2, Episode 2, Initiations. Okay, yes. The young Kazon, played by Aaron Eisenberg, not Nog, searching for his Kazon Oglamar name, taking on Chakotay. And there's a lot of back and forth between these two in this episode. I love it. There's about 15 minutes of just Chakotay and Carr. That's the name of Aaron Eisenberg's Kazon character. And I love it. I dig this episode too because one of the reasons it popped into my head is because Prodigy Season 2's out now, and The Fast and the Curious, which probably not everybody's favorite episode of the new season, but I love the ending of that. It kind of turns out that this Kazon planet is kind of got a testing location for the Oglamar, just like in Initiations that got co-opted by that supercomputer, and all these issues were happening. So anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. This has always been a pretty solid episode for me. I enjoy it, but I really like Robert Beltran and Aaron Eisenberg together. They're back and forth. It's a really strong Chakotay episode, and the young Kazon's trying to earn his name. He messes up trying to kill Chakotay. He ends up getting out of it by killing his Maj, and then getting back in good with the Oglamar. Carr and Chakotay in Initiations. Chris, what's your take on this one?
Well, I think you said it when you used the word solid, because Voyager's second season had a few uneven moments, but this episode wasn't one of them, because it was a solid story between Chakotay and Carr, and it really held up because you had these two characters, and especially props to Aaron Eisenberg playing a different character than Nog, and really carrying the brunt of the story with Chakotay. It was a very good episode for both of them.
Any take on Initiations, Lee?
I'm stunned. This is the first time it got ever mentioned on TrekRanks. I think it's a very underrated episode of Star Trek in general, one I've always really enjoyed. And yeah, I think it's one I feel like I really want to go back and rewatch it now off the back of Star Trek Prodigy Season 2. So great choice.
Yeah, you get two pieces of it, right? You get this, what I talked about with the Kazon, the Oglamar part. It's a kind of a loose thing. But you also get to see Chakotay mentoring Carr, and you see that's just now the way you see Chakotay and Dal interacting. This just everything you see Chakotay do now in Voyager is a little bit more impactful for me after having seen what we see from him and Dal in Prodigy Season 2, which is amazing. People, go see it if you haven't yet. Okay, let's go to round 2. Chris, what is your number 2 pick?
Okay, for this one, the 5 words are, "We are all alone together." The hashtag is "Strange Bedfellows Indeed." And the episode is The Ascent from Deep Space Nine's 5th season. And with this one, you can't get more of an opposites attract than having Quark and Odo stranded on a planet together and needing each other not only to survive the conditions that they're under, but also to get off the planet in some fashion. And having both of them put in that life or death situation where they really need each other just also further extends the relationship, if you want to call it that, between the two, because for the most part, we had really seen them as adversaries or, well, not quite friends in most of the episodes up to that point. But now it really turns their relationship on its head because they're both put out of their respective comfort zones by the events of the episode, whereas Odo was further disadvantaged without his changeling abilities and the fact that he was injured, and Quark having to not only work with Odo to bring him, well, work in some cases, but he was literally carrying Odo along to ensure his survival, but doing work that he was unaccustomed to, because even though he's largely a bartender and a schemer, he actually had to do some technical work in order to set up that beacon. And this was another side of Quark that we hadn't really seen before. And it was just really something to see both characters put in such dire straits. And even though they were rescued at the end of the episode and they were going to be okay once they had been rescued, it led to a more begrudging respect between both characters. And it was interesting to see how there was that little bit of, I won't go all the way to say tenderness, but they did have a friendly moment between the two at the end. And it was a very good way to see how their relationship had basically turned a corner by the end of the episode.
I love it. This is an all-time classic two-hander episode for sure, with Armin Shimmerman and Renee Auberjonois. I mean, they are literally isolated by themselves, the two of them acting remotely almost the whole way through for the whole episode. This 100% would have been on my list, but was on my road. It was one of my road trip picks way back on episode 58. So I cut it off my list. A classic, absolute. It's just so well done all the way across the board. And the fact that the writers were smart enough to, in the half season where Odo was human, to think, let's do this episode, right? This is the only time we can pull this one off with Odo and Quark in this kind of situation where Odo can't just shapeshift his way out of it. I love this episode. It's an absolute classic. Lee, what's your take?
Brilliant pick, and it's one I'm just kicking myself of, like, it's so obvious. How did it not make even my secondary systems? Great pick. I was just thinking about it the other day. I only always have it in my head of, like, as great as the episode is, I always think of it, it's the last episode with the jumpsuits. So I need to go back and really remember it. Like, such a great episode. I always remember just like that frustration where you're like, you could just fly to the top, but damn, just a few episodes too early.
It's the beauty of TrekRanks. You can never think of all the picks. I love this pick, and I'm glad you thought of it, Chris, so we could talk about it. Oh, it's so well done. Especially with the Odo and the lip smacking when they're in the runabout.
You're doing it again.
Doing what?
Smacking your lips.
No, I'm not.
There. Don't you hear that?
The only thing I've heard for the past 4 days is you complaining.
This whole runabout is alive with annoying little noises. Listen.
To what?
That buzzing noise.
I don't hear a thing.
It started over an hour ago.
If you don't like the noises in here, why don't you go into the back?
Because it's even colder back there than it is up here.
Quark, leave the temperature controls alone.
I will when I get it right.
There it is again.
What? That buzzing noise. Don't you hear it?
All this lip smacking, how could I hear anything?
Where's it coming from?
Inside your head.
Shh. Bzzz. I said be quiet! It's coming from here.
It's probably a defective anodyne circuit.
Just the whole thing is so great. They're back and forth. So good. Okay, Lee, what's your number 2 pick?
Yeah, so my 5-word summary: you wouldn't know you're childless. Hashtag a little more seasoned. And that's Riker and Picard in Star Trek Picard, Season 3, Episode 3, 17 Seconds. And this, for me, is just a brilliant two-hander and one of the, a run of great episodes from Jonathan Frakes. But, I think it's been overlooked how great Patrick Stewart is in this one. And there's two parts to the two-hander that I think is really strong here. And, as Picard comes to that kind of realization that he does have a child, there is a bit of a legacy there. You're reminded at the beginning as Riker walks away celebrating the birth of Thaddeus that, there's a bit of sadness there that, he's never had that. And you kind of see the impact on these two characters as they're coming to kind of terms with that. But what makes this such a powerful two-hander is how their quote-unquote families have impacted their kind of decision-making. And, we're so used to the dynamic between the two of a captain and a commander, but what they like now is somewhat equals and so on in terms of command. But I love it when you see the trauma that Riker's kind of gone through. The loss of a child is just something I could never possibly imagine, and what that's done to him. And you can totally understand the decision making that he's doing in this episode. He's trying to play it safe, keep his crew alive, and someone that we think of as a swashbuckler and, a real kind of, you'll swashbuckle into action, becomes more pragmatic, cautious, responsible. And Picard, he's always thought about it as, he's not had those perhaps attachments or perhaps those kind of losses that that Riker might feel as strongly in terms of, I know he's lost family, but a son, a child must be so difficult. And you see Picard, he's not reckless, but he's let's go into action, let's fire in fire phasers, let's take the fight to them, let's get out of here, and so on. And how those two they're debating and arguing what command is, what the decisions that people should make as well. And I think that's so fascinating just to watch how they view that you should support your crew and get them out to safety as well. And I find that personal stakes and kind of the emotional depth between the two of them just great to watch. It's something we rarely saw in Next Generation, to see this kind of level of thing between the two of them. And I just think it's great to see what a more seasoned Riker is and how he's dealt with that trauma. And I just thought this episode, that dynamic, really just went through that whole episode, and to see it kind of come to the end where two people we saw just a few episodes ago off to hijack a starship, essentially. One of them was being kicked off the bridge and so on, and just brilliant writing, brilliant episode, and just fantastic from both of them.
Yeah, this pick is so good. I did not think of it, but it's absolute two-hander there in so many moments together where it's just the two of them going back and forth from the flashbacks to the moments where Riker's just like, you're telling me you don't see what I see. I mean, this is obviously your son. What are you doing here? I mean, it's the Frakes at the absolute top of his game, not only directing, but acting. And Patrick Stewart, of course, doing the things he does. I love this pick. Chris, what's your take on 17 Seconds?
This is an outstanding pick, and it wasn't on my list either, but just how, in some ways, the situation has reversed in a way between Riker and Picard, where Riker is giving Picard the advice and instruction that you should really be with your son right now, given his own background with his, and just outstanding. And oh man, it's excellent also just to see how these two officers, friends, and individuals have just grown together, where Riker felt he could tell Picard what he should be doing, and it was just awesome. Good pick indeed.
That's a great point, Chris. This episode just personifies the fact that these two actors have been doing this together for 35 years with these characters. So good. I love it.
Walk with me, Will.
What did Beverly say?
It's immaterial.
Immaterial? It's your son.
Our survival is the only thing that matters. I've placed the crew of this ship under unnecessary danger. All our efforts must be focused here.
Jean-Luc, talk to him. Moments with your kids. You never know what you might regret. God knows.
Well, it's irreparable. I owe this ship's captain an apology.
Okay, let's close out round 2. We have not had a duplicate. We still have not had a duplicate. I'm thinking I'd be surprised if we don't have any duplicates in this topic, but it looks like we may get through. We'll see in the first round. Here we go. 5 words and a hashtag. This is a massive episode of Star Trek, been picked many times on TrekRanks. 5 words and a hashtag. The River Tamark in winter. Hashtag Stewart and Winfield on the ocean. And this is TNG Season 5, Episode 2, Darmok, of course. 2 captains forging their friendship in a shared experience. 2 absolute acting heavyweights together, doing it all. Action sequences, staring each other down, sitting around a campfire. And then in one of the all-time great scenes in the history of Star Trek, they learn to speak to each other by sharing their stories over the campfire. It's just incredible.
Temba, his arms wide, when you gave me the knife and the fire. Could that mean give? Temba, his arms wide. Darmok. Give me more about Darmok.
Darmok on the ocean.
So Patrick Stewart, the great Paul Winfield, who played Captain Terrell in The Wrath of Khan, of course, on screen together for about 20 minutes total. It's just all fantastic and memorable and one of the most popular episodes of Star Trek. I love it. And I don't know if there's, I just love it all, from the dialogue from the children of Tama to the action sequences and the way the crew is reacting to it all, with that great classic TOS kind of homage and TOS vibe of them trying to deal with it. The whole thing just sings to the end when Patrick Stewart goes back on board the bridge and recites all the language from the children of Tama and kind of solves everything with the other ship. Epic Star Trek. Lee, what's your take on Darmok?
This is like the ultimate two-hander episode, isn't it? Like, I'm sure it's on all of our secondary systems. Like, you think of it, this is the ultimate episode. So, yeah, it's glad it's well represented.
Yeah. Chris, how about you?
It's a classic. There's a reason why this episode just shines, and the performances of Patrick Stewart and Paul Winfield really make this episode what it is, and it's just brilliant. So excellent pick.
Yeah, absolute genius. Okay,
begin round one.
Here we go, round one. Let's see what everybody has. I love this topic. Chris, what's your number one two-hander episode?
Okay, so this episode's 5 words are "gotta get back in time" with the hashtag "it did happen." And that episode is All Our Yesterdays, the penultimate episode from the original series.
Oh, yes.
And this one, well, this episode does
Spock
feature
and
Mr.
McCoy.
Atos, but we're not going to.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Atos, of course. It's
But
the
it was-
library.
Yeah, but that wasn't the reason why I picked it. It was
All right,
because
okay.
of Spock and McCoy. And with them literally trapped in the past of Sarpedon, a completely alien world, that just personified for me what the two-hander episodes are all about. Because after they were trapped and Spock began to revert to Vulcan before it entered its pre-enlightened era, and just seeing Spock not be the Spock that we know and express his love for Zarabeth and feel like he needed to do everything to be with Zarabeth. It was almost shocking at times, especially the scene where he was eating meat. And it's like, whoa, that was huge. And you had McCoy giving him counsel for what he's experiencing, but then Spock seemed to turn on him at certain points, and McCoy just had to snap him back to reality and say, what was your plant like 6,000 years ago? And that snapped Spock out of most of what he was feeling at the time, which was indeed feeling, because this was before the era of logic. And they discovered, unfortunately, that Spock couldn't stay behind because they both needed to return. They both needed to be at the portal in order to return to the present. And that led Spock to another emotion, which was heartbreak, because he had to leave Zarabeth behind because she couldn't make the trip with them, or she would have died because of the programming by the Atavachron. And once they did return, Spock acknowledged what had happened, and McCoy was also there to remind him, no, you can't dismiss this, even though it did happen, but you still had that relationship. And even though Spock coldly said she's dead now, dead and buried, it's obvious that he still felt something for Zarabeth. And this was one of those stories that, if we would have had a fourth season of the original series, or in some form of live action, this could have been a great follow-up at some point. But we did get follow-ups in 2 novels that I read when I was a kid, and they really did stick with me, because with Spock's son with Zarabeth, and it was a little bit of timey-wimey to bring him into those stories, but it was still just a great reminder about how powerful this story was between those 2 characters. So that was my number 1.
I love it. This is such a great, deep cut number 1 pick. All Our Yesterdays is an absolute classic for Trek, to say the least. But just thinking about Leonard Nimoy and DeForest Kelley and the way they're going at it in this episode, where McCoy's kind of McCoy, right? He's the even keel. I mean, it's normal McCoy, not even keel, because it's McCoy. but it's normal McCoy, and then you just see Spock all over the map, just kind of falling apart, for lack of a better term. But Leonard Nimoy is so good in this episode, and their dynamic in their scenes is so great when he grabs him and starts choking him and just says, "I don't like that." God, I love that moment. It always just stuck with me so much. Classic, and another one that kind of matches your Prime Directive perfect, which is so unique. Chris, Lee, what's your take on All Our Yesterdays?
Gosh, this is an episode I've not watched in a long, long time, and I'm going to be rewatching tomorrow. I have really lovely memories of this episode, but you spoke such beautifully about the episode there, Chris. Fantastic choice, and yeah, an amazing list.
Yeah, sweet stuff. Okay, Lee, what's your number one two-hander?
Yep, so my 5-word summary: Lincoln and Nixon face off. Hashtag are we the baddies? And that's Kirk and Gorkon in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country.
Oh my God, so good, yeah.
So for me, they may only share a couple of scenes, but Gorkon's shadow really just runs through the entire film and really drags Kirk, the Federation, to this kind of, peace treaty, this future that we saw in the Next Generation before we got the chance to see it in the original series era. Like, it's Gorkon that does it, and the dynamic between the two at that beginning, and you think of it, Gorkon is meant to be Lincoln. I mean, the imagery of Gorkon, how he styles himself right down to the cane. Right. He's meant to be, this symbol of peace, overcoming kind of this war that's been simmering and burning for years and so on. And, he presents a vision of peace. And, you think of so many of the Klingons that we saw in the original series era and so on. He's someone that's that little bit different. He's someone that you can imagine him and Picard getting on well. He seems ahead of his time. He looks like he belongs in that Next Generation era. And then you've got the old war dog in someone like Kirk, and it goes back to that old Vulcan proverb, only Nixon could go to China. And that's Kirk, someone that is skeptical of peace. He's had his adversaries with the Klingons, and he holds that long-standing animosity. We hear it in that captain's log, and I think that's so fascinating to kind of watch and so on, and that cost of peace, that Gorkon dies for it, and Kirk is kind of he's shaken by it, and this was a good man, and he shouldn't have died, and so on. And I think it's fascinating to just see that Kirk is a leader that a lot of people look up to. Everyone, when we're kids, it was always that classic thing: are you Picard or Kirk? Are you Picard or Kirk? And who's Kirk's hero and so on? Well, we know it's thanks to early 2000s TV adverts. It's Captain Archer, but you could look at someone like Gorkon and someone would go, that was someone that took bold steps, put things behind him to forge a peace and prosperity and so on. And I love how that just drags Kirk through the film. You think how difficult he is at the beginning, resistant to this mission, apathetic to it, just going through the motions, having this dinner, and you see the effort that he makes to kind of preserve this man's legacy and to do him right and so on. And I just find that fascinating, and I just think that thread in a two-hander, it's Kirk, and Gorkon is always hanging, casts a shadow over it. It's not just who's behind it, but it's his ambitions and his goals, and making sure those are fulfilled to get us to that quote-unquote next generation. And I just think it's a great two-hander between the two of them, and David Warner once again.
Yeah, that's what I was going to start with. You get David Warner in your first pick and your last pick. Brilliant. I mean, the guy is the absolute best. He's one of the most underrated actors. So just the fact that you've got Shatner and David Warner going at it. But this is really David Warner just kind of owning this character. So powerful and dynamic. He just he sells it all so well. You laid it out perfectly. And it's the Undiscovered Country. I think your streak is intact. You always find a way. It's amazing. This would not be a traditional two-hander in terms of the heavy load or lift of the film, but certainly in terms of the impact of the scenes they share, which I think is pretty much two. So, Chris, what's your take on Kirk and Gorkon in the Undiscovered Country?
Well, this is a pick I would not have considered, but the way you explained it, Lee, just really brought it all home. And Gorkon's death was just another stop on Kirk's journey in terms of the officer he was and the father he was, but also the person that he would become by the end of the film, where he had another take on Klingons and had another begrudging respect, like I said earlier, for Gorkon and what he did to bring about a new era of peace between both governments. And very good pick there.
Love it. Okay, let's close it out with my round one pick. I thought this one might get picked, so this is awesome. We don't have a single duplicate. Here we go. I rewatched this episode a couple days ago and doing some homework, and I think this episode has an amazing reputation. It's a huge episode, but I think it's also underrated. Maybe one of the most underrated in all of Star Trek. It's just that good. 5 words in the hashtag. A rare gift for obfuscation. Hashtag. Never tell the truth when a lie will do. It's Deep Space Nine Season 2, Episode 22, The Wire. And this is, are they friends? Are they foes? It's we're kind of learning that in this two-hander with Julian Bashir and Garrick at Deep Space Nine. So this is just Bashir and Garrick in The Wire. They have like 4 or 5 scenes together, about 20 total minutes running time, just the 2 actors, nobody else in this 45-minute episode. Alexander Siddig killing it. Andrew Robinson, of course, really maybe the breakout episode for Garrick. It includes all these incredible lines, including, the great line at the end about Garrick's famous declaration that, my dear doctor, they're all true, especially the lies. And there's just all these incredibly woven tales of lies and deceit, where like Garrick has 3 different versions of this story about a shuttle and these Bajoran prisoners that he either kills or frees or lets escape or gets kind of jumped. Anyway, Garrick versus Elam, it's just all unbelievably good. You got the never-ending sacrifice. You got Paul Dooley showing up at the end as Tane. The Obsidian Order kind of launches in this episode. It is all-time classic, and the 2 of them just going back and forth in this episode nonstop is worth the price of admission for any episode of Star Trek. Robert Hewitt Wolf wrote this one, a classic. Chris, what's your take on The Wire?
This is an amazing pick, and the interplay between Bashir and Garrick is just one for the ages because of how Garrick just tries to not reveal anything about him, while Bashir is trying to reveal anything about himself, while Bashir is trying to save his life. And just the walls that Bashir is constantly running into and trying to either surmount or dig under to find out where the reality in all this is. It's just fascinating to watch. And yeah, the last line is one of the greatest last lines and quotes in Star Trek history. So outstanding pick.
All-timer. Lee, how about you?
I had a similar list of and Garrick kind of came up in quite a few of them. I mean, I thought for a second, I was like, are we finally doing In the Pale Moonlight here? That feels like it should be on this list as well. But great choice with the Wire. It's just, there's something about Garrick that he is just the ultimate kind of two-hander and so on, that he does something very few, if any, Star Trek characters can do. And whether it's an episode like The Wire, our man Bashir in The Pale Moonlight, you can imagine if you're Alexander Siddig, Avery Brooks, what a treat it is to be opposite this man and bring his energy. And, even just those one-off scenes with some people, what a treat. He is the ultimate scene partner, I think, and what a treat you'd have if you saw you were going to have an episode with him.
For sure. For sure. All right, let's get into some secondary systems picks really quick here. We'll rattle a few off.
Let's see what you can do with the secondary systems.
Chris, what's just missed your list?
Okay, they include Hippocratic Oath from DS9 with Bashir and O'Brien. Worst case scenario with Tuvok and Paris. Duet with Kira and Goldar Heel.
Yeah, on my list.
Janal from Discovery. This is the one I was going back and forth on because of the interplay between Tilly and Rayner.
Oh, I like that.
Shatter from Voyager between Chakotay and the past Janeway. And I'm surprised no one picked this one, Shuttlepod 1.
Shuttlepod 1 did not get picked.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the standard bearer for all two-hander episodes for sure. You know, I've said this before. It's not one of my favorite episodes. That's fine, but it's not. I don't rate it as high as other people.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. So I'm just going to quickly say. So the Discovery episode I was thinking of was Labyrinth because of the stuff with David Ajala and Sonequa Martin Green when they were kind of going back and forth on her journey, her kind of trying to figure out that Betazoid puzzle. So I like that one. I almost picked that. It was one of my toughest cuts. Lee, what's on your list?
Well, I also had Duet, but I also had Spock and McCoy in Galileo 7, Geordi and Bokra and The Enemy, Wesley and Picard in First Duty, Riker and Shelby, Best of Both Worlds Part 1, Seven and Janeway, Hope and Fear, Burnham and Giorgio, Vulcan Hello, In the Pale Moonlight, and my last choice was, and it was a tough cut, was Mariner and Nick Locarno in Old Friends, New Planets.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. So my other toughest cut was Dawn from Enterprise, because that's just a straight old classic two-hander with Trip and the alien on the planet. Samaritan Snare with Picard and Wesley. Resolution with Chakotay and Janeway on the planet. Change of Heart, Worf and Jadzia. Heart of Stone with Odo and Kira, but it wasn't Kira. And then the other big one that wasn't mentioned here, we talked about Shuttlepod 1. The other big one is Waltz, which was a big Gold Dukat and Avery Brooks kind of vehicle. So, and then I'm just going to rattle off the 5 episodes that were on my road trip list that I eliminated. Well, Paradise wasn't one because that wasn't really a two-hander. But Blaze of Glory, I mentioned. The Ascent, Attached, which TNG, that's a Beverly and Picard two-hander. And then one of my all-time favorite episodes, Indiscretion, which is Dukat and Kira together on the road. So a lot of doubling up there. So I had to eliminate all those. Okay, amazing. We just covered a lot of ground. Let's get into our regeneration cycle. And we're going to cover even more ground with a recap of our picks and some cool stats.
Computer, activate regeneration cycle. Alcoves beta and gamma.
Okay, Chris, recap your picks right now really quick.
Okay, my picks were for round 5, Under the Twin Moons from Discovery. Round 4, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow from Strange New Worlds. Round 3, The Next Phase from TNG. Round 2, The Ascent from DS9. And round 1 was All Our Yesterdays from the original series.
Fantastic list. You definitely spread it around with 5 different incarnations. So TOS, TNG, Deep Space Nine, Discovery, and Strange New Worlds on your list. Lee, how about you?
Yeah, from 5 to 1, Chain of Command Part 2, For the Uniform, Damage, The Undiscovered Country, and 17 Seconds.
I love it. So you had also 5 different incarnations with TOS, TNG, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, and Picard all reflected. And my list was Armageddon Game from Deep Space Nine. Number 4 was Minefield from Enterprise. Number 3, Initiations from Voyager. Number 2, Darmok from TNG. And number 1, Deep Space Nine, The Wire. I had 2 from Deep Space Nine, and then 1 each from TNG, Voyager, and Enterprise. All right, some cool stats. First of all, I knew this was going to happen because for some reason, when you start breaking this down, and it's partially because it's the way TV's been made forever. It's changing in the last 5-10 years, but I knew it was going to be male dominated in terms of we have 15 picks, so that's pretty much 30 actors that are going to be featured here as two-handers. So there was only 4 women picked out of those 30, which I kind of assumed was going to be the case. So not great there. But in terms of the overall acting breakdown, anybody with 2 picks, I kept a record of. So with 2 picks each, Scott Bakula had 2 choices. David Warner was chosen twice. And Alexander Siddig ended up on 2 of my lists. So, which I just realized for the first time. And leading the way with 3 overall picks, not a surprise, Patrick Stewart, the all-time legend. And then for our series breakdown, this is cool. Every single live action regular series of Trek got a pick. I love when that happens. So we had 1 each from Voyager, Discovery, Picard, and Strange New Worlds, 2 from TOS and Enterprise, 3 from TNG, and 4 from Deep Space Nine. Amazing. All right. Great topic. But now it's time to initiate a temporal inversion because it's time to hear from you.
Initiate temporal inversion.
Initiating.
And for this week's temporal inversion, we're going back just 2 episodes to episode 187 and our top 5 mediocre episodes, which I got to tell you was a classic episode of Trek Ranks, one of my all-time favorites we've ever done. We got a ton of feedback, and we got this quick voicemail in from friend of the show, Chris Chaplin, who is at Shelf Nerds on Twitter. A fantastically mediocre list. Here is his voicemail.
All right, Jim, this topic, top 5 mediocre episodes, is such a great topic that I had to send in my picks. So here are my top 5 picks for mediocre episodes. At number 5, Best Friends Talking in Tubes. Hashtag, I cannot stun my cat. And this is Force of Nature. There's nothing more middle of the road than 2 friends talking about their mundane, daily, low-stakes personal and workplace problems. Geordi wants to improve some statistic about the engine, and Data wants to train his cat. And number 4, character pairings are insightful fun. Hashtag, we do nothing. And this is Voyager's Twisted. The fun, if nonsensical, twisting of Voyager allows the crew to pair up in fun ways to solve the mystery of the anomaly of the week. We get no resolution about the anomaly, it never comes back, but all the pairings of the characters are fun, especially Chakotay being uncertain about, who was actually listening to him on his ship. And number 3, solid Chakotay story without, quote, heritage. Hashtag, pen and paper. And this is unforgettable. I don't get the hate for this episode. I think it's a pretty middle of the road episode, and actually a decent Chakotay episode that has nothing to do with indigenous peoples and the false representation of them by the Chakotay character. He just loves and he learns and he loses like a human. It's a very human Chakotay episode. And I love that he writes on paper in the end. And I find the tension of his doomed relationship compelling. And number 2, quote, measure of a man, end quote, connection. Hashtag, but you are unique. And this is the quality of life from TNG. The Crusher scenes elevate this episode out of the rote scientists blinded by their work story. That's a pretty standard Star Trek story, but the investigation of whether the exocomps are alive and Data's questions in collaboration with Dr. Crusher make this really entertaining to watch. Also, Data rebelling against Riker is a pretty fun, if not uncomfortable scene as well. And my number 1 pick for top mediocre episodes. Does that make it the most mediocre? 5 words. Helping Planet of the Week. Hashtag the Mediocre 7. And that's Marauders, which is famously based off of the Magnificent 7. And this is a typical Star Trek story elevated by performances, the involvement of the whole cast, and the insights we get into Archer as a leader. And also the rogue Klingons are ironically like discount Kazon, and that's pretty fun. All right. Thanks for coming up with this great topic. Live long and prosper.
Okay, I love that list, and we're going to go through a quick speed round of mediocre or not mediocre with our guests here because I just can't get enough of this. So really quick, Lee and Chris, Force of Nature, is it mediocre? TNG.
Yeah, it's mediocre.
Chris, what do you got?
Yeah, it had its moments, but it's still fair to middling.
I think it's too good. I love Force of Nature. All right, Voyager's Twisted. Chris.
Very mediocre.
Lee.
Too good.
Too good. I think it's not good enough. All right, that's right down. We got 3 different votes. I love it. Okay, Voyager's Unforgettable. Chris, what's your vote?
Too good.
Too good. Okay, Lee.
Yeah, it's not good.
Not good enough. I got mediocre. We had another 3-way split. I love it. The Quality of Life from TNG. Lee, what's your vote?
Not good.
Not good? Oh my God. I got too good. So you're the tiebreaker, Chris. What do you got?
I said mediocre.
Oh my God. 3 in a row. 3 in a row. 3-way splits. Last one. Enterprise Marauders. Chris.
Mediocre.
Me too. Perfect mediocre pick. Lee.
Not good.
Oh man, we couldn't agree on even one of those. Classic. All right, go listen to top 5 mediocre episodes, one of our favorites. So once again, those picks more than enough to clear ourselves from this week's temporal inversion. So as always, I want to thank everyone for all your great responses to the TrekRanks podcast. Please keep your list coming to me at TrekRanks on Twitter so we can retweet them. But we also want to hear from you. So put together your own list of top 5 two-hander episodes or a list from any of our past shows. Give us a call at the Tricorder Transmissions at 757-828-RANK. That's 7265. Or you can just record a message and then you can send me a DM. We can connect that way too. So hopefully we'll hear from you so you can be featured on the next episode of Trek Ranks. And on the next episode of Trek Ranks, oh no, it's Star Trek Las Vegas time again, which means we have to do another live show from STLV. So next week, we're going back to everyone's favorite abstract topics. We're doing another letter of the alphabet. I think this is going to be a good one. I'm sure it won't be crazy at all. Next week, we're doing abstract V. It's nice. Abstract V. But as you know on Trek Rank, sometimes the title means more than one thing. Is that the letter V? Or is it a Romulan numeral 5? I don't know. Do you? Well, that's the question you have to answer, Your Honor. The courtroom is a crucible. If we burn away irrelevancies until we're left with pure product, the truth of all time. That's from Measure of a Man. Okay, Chris and Lee, if you had to pick one abstract V topic off the top of your head, what would you pick? Chris, anything jumping into your head?
Yeah, the Voyager conspiracy.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, nice.
The episode, see, you could pick anything. That's a great one. You could do 5 different kind of Voyager things too, just from the Voyager spacecraft, Voyager the ship, Voyager conspiracy. I like that. Okay.
V'ger
alone. Oh my God, so good.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kirk flipping someone off in Star Trek 4: The Voyage Home. Because I should explain.
In the UK, it's a V.
It's called flipping the V in the UK. So that's my one.
Fantastic. Okay. It took me a second, but I got it before you explained it. All right. Abstract B is going to be a wild time with our live show out of Star Trek Las Vegas where everything goes. All right. Going to be great.
Channel closed. Reset. Subspace communication. Scrambler code Riker 1.
Scrambler code Riker 1 acknowledged. All right. We're going to close this episode out with a huge thanks to Chris Burris and Lee Hutchison. Awesome having you guys on the show. Any final Trek Scrambler codes either one of you want to relay before we depart? Chris.
Well, thanks for the opportunity once again, and it was good to finally have the chance to interact with you, Lee. So thanks for being part of the show today.
Awesome stuff. Great job as always, Lee. Thanks for coming back on, man.
Yeah, the honor is to serve.
I love it. Well said. All right. Thanks, everyone, for engaging with us here again on episode 189 of the TrekRanks podcast. As always, I want to close by saying I'm looking forward to standing with you again here in this place where I belong.
So I let them go. I gave them whatever Latin I had in my pockets and opened the door and flung them back into the streets. Elam couldn't believe his eyes. He looked at me as if I were insane.
You took pity on those children. There's nothing wrong with that.
No! I was a fool! I should have completed my interrogation and turned them over to the troops for execution. But because I was chilly and my stomach was growling, I failed in my duty and destroyed everything I had worked for.
And so they exiled you.
That's right! And left me to live out my days with nothing to look forward to but having lunch with you.
I'm sorry you feel that way. I thought you enjoyed my company.
Oh, I did. And that's the worst part. I can't believe that I actually enjoyed eating mediocre food and staring into your smug, sanctimonious face. I hate this place. And I hate you.
Okay, Garak. That's your prerogative.
Just want to remind everyone again that the entire TrekRanks catalog is available for you to download and listen to at TrekRanks.com and on your podcast player of choice. Our episodes never get carbon dated, so check out the topics you've missed and maybe just want to listen to again over at TrekRanks.com. And a reminder to check out our friends 5-Year Mission at 5yearmission.net. They're writing a song for every episode of Star Trek, and you won't believe how great their music is. They also have a podcast at the Trek Geeks Network, so seek them out. You won't regret it.
You know, I still have a lot of questions to ask you about your past.
I've given you all the answers I'm capable of.
You've given me answers, all right. But they were all different. What I want to know is, out of all the stories you told me, which ones were true and which ones weren't?
My dear doctor, they're all true.
Even the lies?
Especially the lies.